All right. Good morning, everyone. How you doing? You're live out there? Awesome. Cool. So I'm Scott.
I'm Shankar.
And we're going to give you a lot of information in the next 60 minutes, hopefully not too much information, on how to use Azure with your SUSE and SLES workloads. Just before I get started, how many of you are Azure customers? Okay. How many are looking to move to the public cloud? Yep. Not currently? Okay. Yep. So a combination of the both. So if you're an Azure customer, you'll probably learn some of the services that you may or may not be using in the session. And obviously, if not, I'll start from scratch, but I'll go quickly through the broad Azure slides, given that many of you are customers and we have lots to cover. To make this session interesting and less about slideware, we've created a customer scenario for you. So imagine you're a customer, in this case, we're City Power and Light. I currently have an application, it's running on premises, it's running in SLES, and it's a web app with a bunch of infrastructure and a VM. And I'm going to take that application up into Azure. And the typical way that I would do that first is following Gartner's framework. I would rehost it. But then I may take advantage of more cloud services and refactor it. And I may even go the next step and re-architect it. And so we're going to take this application through a journey of rehosting, refactoring, and re-architecting on Azure. And depending on where you are, you may stop at rehost, and that's maybe all you do as a result of the session. Or over the period of time, you may go out to re-architect, but we want to give you all of the different options that you have. So just very quickly, from an overall perspective, why would you use SUSE on Azure? Well, first of all, lots of folks use Azure, 95% of the Fortune 500 do. There's lots of Linux on Azure, roughly 50%, and when I mean roughly, some days it's 49.1 and other days it's 50.2. Because obviously people keep adding VMs to Azure all the time. So roughly 50% of all the virtual machines on Azure are Linux. Okay, so there's lots of customers using Linux and SUSE within that. One of the key reasons customers choose Azure is our regional split. You know, instead of having a single data center like you might have or two, we have 56 of them spread all around the world. So you really get global reach when you take advantage of the Azure data centers. We do not have an Azure data center in New Zealand, in case you wondered where my accent's from, which is that little country up there on the bottom hand corner. So what are some of the benefits of running SUSE workloads on Azure? Well, the first one is we've actually optimized the experience. So we've worked with the SLES kernel team and the Azure hypervisor team to get 15% incremental performance on SLES running on the Azure hypervisor. So you get great performance on Azure with your SLES workloads. You can also take advantage of the cloud application platform integration with our Azure Kubernetes service, if you're doing Kubernetes as an example. So first piece is really optimized experience. The second piece is enterprise support. Today we have 24/7 collaborative support and workloads you'd expect, such as SAP, as well as HPC are supported on SLES directly running on Azure. So move there, you get the support that you would expect. The approach, if you find an issue, is you call Microsoft. Microsoft picks up the phone. We fix the issue, or we work with the SLES engineer, which is sitting nearby, to go fix the issue with you collaboratively. So you're fully supported in these scenarios. And of course, we have flexible licensing. You can bring your own license that you may already have. You can pay on demand, or you can even buy reservations, which is a forward-looking. It's like a forward-looking block of Azure computing capability that you buy at a discounted price. So there's plenty of different ways to purchase in the model. Well, this particular session is actually going to show you a lot about how to use SLES with the native tools that are built directly into the product for security and management. I do not want to lose sight to the fact that many of you are already using, I don't know, Grafana for monitoring, or choose your favorite tools and technologies across the full spectrum. And Azure supports all of them. We have a very open environment for all of the tools that you would use for DevOps, for management, applications, frameworks, the whole shebang. We use all of those. In this example, we're going to show you how you can use the built-in tools, which we think have some pretty strong productivity advantages. But if all you want to do is rehost what you already have, go right ahead. We really do support an open ecosystem. Our goal here is at some level to sell you, the hardware that does compute for any of the world's workloads on it. So with that being the case, let's talk about the app in a little bit more detail. So the City Powered Light app, the front end is a web front end. It's built on Spring Boot using Tomcat as the runtime engine. And it's on premises at the moment in a dev box. It could also be in a production box. Of course, it uses a MongoDB backend. And the first thing I want to do is really move that virtual machine without thinking too much about refactoring and re-architecting to Azure. I'm going to rehost it in Azure. So with that, we'll pray to the monitor switching gods. And in a minute or two, we'll be up and showing you how we rehost it. So let's go ahead, Shankar.
All right. Okay, all right, so we're on. So I had this app that Scott mentioned. It's running localhost, so it's running on my Mac, and it's running perfectly fine. It's a very simple app. It has a, you can report incidents here, so you go and report an outage. You can also see a dashboard of all the different outages that's been done. So it's a simple app now, but it could be any of the app that you're running on premises. It doesn't have to be Java Spring Boot. It could be a 3-tier app. It could be an N-tier app too, right? And as Scott mentioned, we are tasked to go and push this app into Azure. So how many of you here have used the Azure portal? Have logged into? Okay, a few of you. Okay, so if you're new to Azure portal, you can log into Azure portal. It has all the things, every Azure service in there. And what I've done already is gone to the marketplace and look for SUSE, right? And you can see the different. Let me see if I can make this bigger. Here you go. So you can see all the different SUSE Linux versions here. There's one for HPC. There's one for SAP. These are all optimized. And you can pick the basic one if you want. And here you get to pick the different versions. So I have 11SP4, 12SP4, 15, whichever version of SUSE Linux that you want. Okay, and just do create. Now you'll get a form, and you have to fill in the form of like what kind of VMs do you want, what kind of storage do you want, all that, right? So that's one way of doing it. But we see a lot of the customers doing this the first time. They learn from the portal, and then they try to do it through command line. So let's see the command line experience. So here's the command line. So the thing here is that if I just run these 4 commands, so the first command is a login, so that auths me, so I can run this and it will ask me to authenticate against Azure, which I've already done. Once I do that, every account has multiple subscriptions underneath it, so you just pick the right subscription. And then the first thing you create is not a VM. The first thing you create in Azure is a resource group. So resource group is a logical grouping of your resources, and we'll come to why it's important later on. But think about it as a very convenient way of organizing your resources. So everything that City, Power, and Light needs, I'm going to put in this one resource group. And then this command here is going to create a VM, and you can see I pass in the resource group, so I tell it which resource group the VM should be part of. I can give it location, and I can pick any location in the world, so all the 56 regions that Scott mentioned. I give it a username, so I'm going to give the username admin user, and instead of password, I'm going to use my SSH key that I like. And I'm going to pick the image. I'm going to give the image name as SLES. That picks the default image, which is 15. So I just need to run this and then open the port, so my app can connect back on port 80, and that's it, right? So instead of having to go through all the steps, what I've already done is run all that, and I have my VM up and running. And once I have my, I have a VM, I'm going to get a public IP address, and then once I have that IP address and I log into the VM, I know the rest, right? It's like running anything in your data center. You have your VM, you can SCP the files over, you run your command, you run your script, and it sets up everything. So I have my script here that I'm supposed to run once I get everything up, and the script just goes ahead and sets up MongoDB, sets up Java, sets up my API and web tier, and that's it. So everything's going to run in one VM. So right before this, I just kicked it off. I kicked off the script. So let's see where we are.
Takes about 5 minutes to run.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I have this created, and this is the IP that it's giving me. So I'm going to copy that. And let's go put it in here. And okay, so it's the same app. So I have it running localhost. and it's the exact same copy of this app running on Azure, right? So we got everything running on Azure, so welcome to Azure. So we got the first part done. So we got the app running. There's no change in the app. It's exactly the same thing. The only difference is now it's a virtual machine running on Azure. Okay. So the second part to this is where
just keep going.
Yeah. So the second part is like, okay, so we got it running on Azure, but how can Azure make this app better, right? How can we make this app more resilient? So.
Yep. Yeah, that's not the answer.
Picture. Yeah. I mean, that's one. That's very peaceful. But so the thing that you can do is the next logical step for this app to evolve is let's pick the components in the app that I'm managing and having to manage on Azure, and let's see if there's an equivalent in Azure, preferably a fully managed service that I can offload it to, right? And you'll find that as when Scott Fix said, so we have MongoDB running locally, right? Is there an equivalent MongoDB in Azure? And the answer is yes. Azure has a fully managed database service called Cosmos DB, which has an API which is compatible to MongoDB, and you can just use that MongoDB API and you don't have to do anything. In fact, you don't even have to make a code change. You just need to change your connection string to use the Cosmos DB endpoint. So that's easy. So just use you just use Cosmos DB instead of MongoDB. The other thing is that there is a feature here where I can upload an image file as part of the app if I want to notify that this is a specific issue that's happening. So the image file is stored locally, and with Azure provides you all kinds of storage options. So there's a blob storage option which I really like. So instead of storing everything locally on the VM, I'm going to start using blob storage. So push everything to blob storage, right? And finally, you've noticed this app, like most of the content is pretty static. Like the complaint doesn't change so there's very little updates going on. So if I can insert a cache between my API tier and web tier, things are going to go much faster, right? And so that's the new architecture I'm going to strive for. So if I get everything up here, then I'm going to use more of the managed services that Azure provides. And you'll see that the benefit here is this VM has become stateless now. All that is running is 2 Tomcats for API and web tier, and that's it. Like everything else is out of the box, right? So that's it. And now that Scott's...
You got to see that for 5 seconds, but
yeah.
the short version is we're refactoring the back end. Does that make sense, folks? Okay. And then let's see if we can work this through. Sorry, there may be some challenges backwards and forwards. It seems to reset pretty well. Let's see. Yeah. So. Great. So, all right. So we have this change already done, and this is the resource group. So we can see how resource group is easy for me to just, I already have select resource groups, but within a resource group there are so many resources. If I go and look at all resources together, then like too many things going on. So the resource group just gives me a convenient way to just look at things I want to look at. And you'll see that I have my Redis cache here, I have my storage account created, and I have my Cosmos DB, and this is all created now, and it's going to use those components instead of putting everything locally on Xbox. And so this is the CityPower VM. And let's see if I have a... All right, so I just wanted to pick this IP address. And go. All right, so now we are at the point where it was running locally. We put it on a single VM in Azure, the exact same app, and now I use 3 managed services in Azure. It just made it much better. It's the exact same app, so there's no difference in the app, but it's much more resilient. How much work did it take to move from that first step of rehosting to the second step of refactoring?
So the rehosting was pretty straightforward. It's just took me the 4 commands. Mm-hmm. This one, it's a good point. There is some effort involved because although the Cosmos DB part didn't cause me any problems, the thing that caused me problems was the blob storage because I had to go change my code for blob storage, and I had to introduce Redis cache, so that's some code change. Not a lot because it didn't affect my core business logic, but there are pieces where I was accessing data where I could change things. So there's some effort involved. So if it's an app that you own, it's very easy to do. If it's a third-party app, not that easy.
Gotcha. And because of the Mongo head on top of Cosmos, that just worked.
That just worked.
Other than redirecting a connection string or something similar.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Sounds good. So with that, let's go back and talk about governance. So one of the interesting things in general around the cloud that provides, and it really doesn't love me, does it? We just have to keep looking at pictures of my family. If you ever want to visit Leavenworth, Washington in April, it's beautiful, and you'll continue to see that, I suspect. I'm going to talk and we'll eventually get slides. One of the things that's very interesting in Azure is this notion of governance. And of course, historically, yeah, that's just beautiful. Historically, governance has been a little bit of a challenge inside businesses. Businesses tended to choose where they wanted to be on the governance spectrum. Either you had fully empowered developers that were absolutely empowered to put things in production and had full control of their environments, but the risk of doing that was that occasionally releases went wrong and there was bad service for customers as a result, or more commonly you did not have that, in which case your ability to be agile was affected because there would be a manual approval process associated with every production release, and an IT person would be in there working through should I or should I not put this into production with a manual set of steps. And that's historically how businesses work for a long time. And so as a result of that, customers chose different axes. Some customers were a little bit more developer-centered and were pushing out releases faster, and for certain workloads maybe that was fine. Other more regulated customers and lots of enterprise customers tended to take a slower approach to releases. In today's world, yeah, can you just bump it around a few more times and see if it helps? In today's world, the bottom one, this one, definitely don't do that. In today's world, the problem is you don't want to be choosing between, can you try and get the slides up on yours? You don't want to be choosing between speed and control. Speed, the developer getting into production quickly, and control, IT having the ability to make sure everything's going right. You actually want both at the same time. And the challenge with that historically has been all of the manual processes. I'm just going to stay in this notes mode because it seems like it's the only thing that actually works. So all of the manual processes that have been involved are the problem. And the reason the manual processes exist on premises is there was no underlying framework for governance. It wasn't like you could set policies across 10 different applications on premises and have all of those policies just magically work in most cases, because all of the infrastructures were very heterogeneous. But when you're in a cloud and you have a consistent underlying framework, you can actually do things consistently, programmatically from a governance perspective. And so one of the things that we've done in Azure, if this will let me get to the next slide somehow. Hey, I'll probably do that. Or not. There we go. Is give you both the notion of speed and control by putting governance underlying properties into ARM, which is the fundamental deployment language of Azure. And so what this means is that you can create subscriptions which have setup already done in them, so that you can give them to a developer and you can say, you can do whatever you want inside the subscription, but I've set up some criteria. So for example, I've set up security restrictions. You must not make any public-facing endpoints. Or I've set up sizing restrictions. The only VMs that I'm interested in you using are of this specific size. Maybe it's a dev test subscription, so it's small VMs to manage cost. Or whatever policy on whatever resource you want to create. And so we've seen customers use this, like BP as an example, where the highly innovative parts of their organization, they have some security controls on their subscriptions, but not a lot else. They can do whatever they want. The highly innovative people, the small group of people do that. And then the folks that are more the mainstream developers have a bunch more controls associated with what they're doing, and then they have another group of folks who are largely the low-end, less innovative, more consumey type folks that still need to build things, who are very tightly locked down. And so by setting up these governance rules up in advance through policies and subscriptions, through the central IT or through the cloud governance or cloud excellence or cloud custodian organizations that are emerging. Then you can give developers sandboxes to play in, but your outsourced developer in India has a specific set of things that they can do and access that they have, which really gives you the best of both worlds. It gives you the control that's done up front so that then the developer has a controlled world, but it also means the developer can go do whatever they want in terms of going into production regularly, etc. And you can even run in your pipelines code to check that all of the policies are correct before you go push into production. So this notion of taking policy into the CI/CD pipeline, so as you go out to production, you know for a fact you're compliant. So there's really lots here in the governance space that we won't be able to do justice to. This has been one of the biggest attractors to big customers on Azure. Literally 300 of the top 300 customers on Azure are using this stuff, and it only turned up in August of last year. So this has been a big deal, particularly for customers who have hundreds, in some cases thousands of subscriptions, multinationals, needing to organize those subscriptions and empower different people in the organizations with different things. This is a great way to do it. There's also this notion of management groups, where you can set up, you're a person who's, maybe you're the outsourced developer person, maybe I'm the security person, maybe there's someone else in another role, and so you can give roles to people, and based on their role they get different visibility. So one more thing I want to hit on in governance before we actually show you some of the stuff, we'll show you some policies that are built into the framework, is this notion of cost management. Because governance is two things: set up all the rules, but because cloud is a pay-as-you-go thing as opposed to pay a lot up in advance, customers typically want to know, like, what am I spending my money on, and am I doing it in a resource-efficient way? Maybe I've bought VMs that are too big in terms of CPU and memory. On premises, you're kind of stuck most of the time with that, right? In the cloud, you can downsize those and save money. And so we have a set of tools that are built into the Azure portal that are free, which are the cost management tools. Also, by the way, the governance tools are free. And so with cost management, what you can do is get a real-time API view of your spend on the platform at any point. And so you can use that to do things like self-service to other teams. We attribute costs to different parts of the organization. And put that through. You can look at overspends in certain areas and redirect them with alerts on top of that. And of course you can do two levels of modification in terms of cost. The first being downsizing or maybe upsizing VMs. If VMs are being used at 85-90% capacity, maybe you need to upsize them. If they're at 25, downsizing them. And then you can also look at moving from pay-as-you-go to that reservation thing I talked about earlier, where if you're running a workload for a longer period of time, you can save money by buying a discount associated with, I'm going to run it for 6 months, so I'll buy 6 months worth of compute. So you can do a supply-demand curve basically to determine the break-even point for a reservation. So there's a lot here in the cost management part, all available for free within the portal experience itself. And certainly that governance piece and that cost management piece are two of the areas that I get a lot of feedback from customers, that they get lots of confidence on using Azure based on being able to see these things in the portal. So with that, Shankar, why don't you show some of it?
Yeah. So let's start with cost management, right? So cost is top of mind. So you want to make sure that you have visibility into cost. The thing with the new capabilities we added to cost analysis is that I can go down and actually pick, and I can pick like month on month, weekly, daily, whatever granularity you want. And the thing that we talked about, the resource group that you just launched, I can go and actually see how much is it costing me now. So this one is $3.92 so far. This one which is on $14.50, that seems to be a bigger version of the app. So you can actually drill down by resource group and find out per resource group, which is usually mapped to per project, how much is it costing you. You can drill down by resource type and see what kind of resources, like how much VMs costing me versus how much the Redis cache costing me. So you can drill down whichever way and dice your cost data whichever way you want. The thing that's also popular is budget. So you can actually go and create a budget, which I already have here. And if you look at the budget, I have a budget, so Scott's given me $1,000 for this. I'm going to set my budget at $1,000. and when it hits $1,000, it's obviously gonna give me alerts, but I can set alerts beforehand. So I set an alert at 80%. So when it hits, when the cost hits $800, I start getting notifications, and I can log in and see what's going wrong and fix it, right? So you got visibility and control into your cost. So that's one part of it. The other thing you talked about, Scott, is policies, right, and governance. So let me show you about governance. So I have gone to the policy stream, and what I'm showing you is the built-in policy. So this is a list of like lots of different policies here that I can, pick, and they're at VM level, like every resource level, there are different kinds of policies. You can also author your own policy. If you want to author a policy, it's just like writing a JSON file. You just say, if this condition happens, then do this action, or do this one, right? It's just an if then else thing. So it's just a JSON. I remember that because we're going to come back to that. So what I'm going to do is pick one and show you how it works. So I'm going to pick my favorite one that's also related to cost. So what I'm doing here is picking a SKU, right? Okay, so it's loaded now. And then I can pick my SKUs here. So what I'm doing here is limiting, for that particular resource group, limiting the kind of VMs that you can launch. And why is that important? If you go to the pricing for SLES, you'll find that, prices start, you can start for like 0.4 cents an hour, so that's really cheap. But you can go down and you can see that, it gets expensive because there are some VMs which are like so big. It can be like $26, and this is a huge VM. It's like 3,892 GB of RAM. I have 250 GB of hard disk space on my Mac, so this is 10 times more than, and it's just RAM. So it's 3.8 terabytes of RAM, so it's awesome. Like the app teams would really love it, but it's super expensive too, and there's no reason for us to use this for City Power and Light. So I'm gonna restrict that, and I'm gonna pick the SKUs that I really need.
Just before you go there, I'd use that for my SAP HANA instance or something like that. That's why it exists,
really,
right?
Yeah.
Big memory instances. Yeah.
Right. So I can actually pick the SKUs, and what I'm going to do for this app is restrict myself to just the basic ones. Right. So I just pick 3 SKUs and I assign it. And now if I try to create a new VM that's a different SKU on this resource group, Azure, the controls plane will not allow me to do that, right? So you have controls in place. The other thing I'm going to show you is something called Initiators. So just like a resource group is a collection of resources, Initiative is a collection of policies. The canonical example here is ISO. So let's say I want to make sure I'm ISO 27001 compliant. Now that's a lot of different things, so I can pick that and just say assign it to my resource group. I've already done it, so what I'm going to do is go to my dashboard, and when that loads, I'm going to pick and see. What I can see is for ISO 27001 against this resource group, how compliant am I? So it's going to list me all the different policies. So this one here. So it's going to list all the different policies and tell me, how am I doing against these policies. So the good thing is, we followed a lot of the defaults here, and we're compliant for the most part. There are things which we are not compliant, right? I'm going to pick one randomly. So this is the Redis cache one. Okay, so let's see what's wrong here. I'm going to pick the Redis cache, and it's telling me that, I should be only allowing secure connections to Redis cache. That seems like the right thing to do, but it turns out I'm not doing that. Okay, so let's actually look at the resource. And what I want to find out is like, okay, what am I doing wrong with the Redis cache thing? Like maybe I configured something incorrectly, and I'm going to see if Azure can let me find it. So I'm going to go to settings here, and sure enough, I haven't turned on SSL, so I need to turn on SSL. And that's going to disable the non-SSL port, so this is making sure that it only has secure traffic. And I'm going to save it, and I come back. What I can do is, so that should fix it. So then I can go through the rest of it. So it's essentially just going line by line, and policy is going to handhold you and tell you exactly what you need to do to fix it. Now, if this was something where if you're going to read documentation, this is going to be like hundreds of pages of documentation just to find out what's needed, and then figuring out how to do it on Azure. So policy just makes it easy, and it's just going line by line and fixing everything. So I feel like once I do this, I'm really in good shape. Like I feel like I got visibility into costs, and I feel like I can put all the policies in place, and I'm really ISO 27001 compliant, so I'm in control here.
Very cool. And in case you're wondering, oh yeah, if you can do it, perfect. In case you're wondering, he had an audit policy. You typically would set up a policy and audit and observe behavior, and then when you recognize that everybody had been reined down in, you'd enforce it. You can start immediately from enforce, at which point you wouldn't need to remediate anything, because it would be you wouldn't have a choice but to go ahead and enable that SSL in every instance. But many customers start with auditing and then move to enforcing.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk. Can I do a little bit on security, or you want me to go there? Okay, I'll just do security quickly. So from a security perspective, about 5 years ago when I first started on Azure, many large customers came to me, and the common conversation before I got to "Hi, I'm Scott" was like, "Tell me about security and why would I ever move my stuff into the public cloud?" I can tell you the same group of customers today, can you go one further, are running in the public cloud and come to me regularly and say, "Gee, the level of resourcing that you have against security," the level of resourcing that you have against security in the public cloud with your $1 billion that you spend and your 3,500 security professionals and your CDOC and your SecOps and all of the resources that we have on this, and the 6 trillion signals from the internet that you pick up every single day from a threat perspective are far more than whatever I could do. And actually we think of Azure security as a weapon in terms of fighting the bad guys as opposed to a reason not to move. So that's the progression we've seen for customers who've been in the product for a period of time. And obviously security is a big deal for us. It's kind of something you don't get wrong at a business level if you're a public cloud, hence the massive level of investment associated with it. At a service level, it's important to point out that security is not something that Microsoft provides that you can do nothing and still be secure. If that VM that you re-hosted on Azure had a password, just like in your enterprise, if that VM had management ports open to the internet and a password, it'll get owned in your enterprise, it'll get owned in Azure, probably faster in Azure, just because people are looking faster, but it'll get owned. So it's critical that you think of security with Azure as being a joint responsibility between us and between you. And we have a bunch of best practices that are documented, and we can't take you through in this short period of time. But they're very important, one of which is close your management ports by default. The RDP and SSH attacks are second to DDoS in all of the attacks on the internet. DDoS we take care of at the platform level. RDP and SSH, you want to make sure your management ports are closed by default. There's a feature in Security Center that enables you to do that. And then every aspect of the architectural stack has security built into it, whether it be the identity side with Active Directory, MFA, etc. I won't read the whole slide, but data protection, network security with make sure you have network security groups with NSGs on. You saw some of those in the architecture diagram. All the way to threat protection using the 6 trillion signals that we have, so we can really understand if you have been compromised and build the complete attack chain and then mitigate against it. So Azure has a very comprehensive set of both security and management tools that are built in. I think we were the first vendor to realize that this needed to be a first-party offering as well as, of course, any third-party offering you have. So if you're using a Symantec or a Dome9 or whoever it is, feel free to continue using them. They work just fine. But we've deeply integrated security into the platform. And in fact, we were the first vendor at RSA Security Conference last week or a couple of weeks back to announce a first-party public cloud native SIEM. So for the security people in the room, which there probably aren't too many, a SIEM is the system that collects all of the logs from all of your enterprise across everything. There isn't an Azure thing, but it happens to use Azure as the massive data store for all of those logs, on which you can then do advanced analytics, fancy querying, or artificial intelligence using the machine learning that's built into Azure to take from all these low fidelity signals and understand specific active threats and mitigate against them. For those of you who are using Office 365, you can take your Office 365 data in for free, but this is no means restricted to Microsoft stuff. It works great on SLES on premises, it works great on Palo Alto firewalls, F5, Barracuda, etc., etc. So this is another example of using security as a weapon, because most of these on-premises SIEMs that you may have today have scalability challenges or expense challenges. They tend to have expensive licensing, and they tend to be not very scalable because you have them on your own hardware. So they're perfectly suited as a problem set for use in the cloud. So with that, why don't I pass it back and think that works a whole lot better than doing the 2PC thing. Yep.
All right, so security. So this was interesting because setting it up, I just learned so much myself. So Security Center, the first thing I learned is that Security Center gives me this score, right? So it gives you a secure score. Now this feels like kind of score I get in school because I don't feel like I'm passing the score. So it's 316 out of 690. Okay?
You only need 42 marks to pass, right?
That's what I thought. So the thing I really know is compute and apps. So I'm going to dig down and see, okay, why am I failing in compute and apps? And what it's going to bring up is each of the different issues that it's seeing, and I can actually group out of this and see, okay, if I just enable monitoring agent, because monitoring agent not just looks at monitoring, it also looks at the security posture too. So you can find issues. It's a signal. It's a leading signal for most of the things, right? So Security Center wants me to install the monitoring agent so you can get more visibility. So if I just do that, that's 38 points right there that I can get, right? But there are things that it's really not that difficult for me to do. Like if you just go through the list, I can actually fix most of this. Let me look specifically at VMs, right? And so this is that VM that we are using, and there's some red there. So let's dig that. So it's telling me my network security groups, which is what controls what ports are open for the VMs to talk outside and what traffic comes inside. They're not very hardened. And the thing it's telling me that Scott was actually mentioning is the management ports, right? Now management ports is telling me is that it's open. If I go in, it's going to tell me, so this is the networking piece, and it doesn't like this SSH thing being open to everybody. It's open to the whole world. Now this is tough for me to solve because if I turn off SSH, there are lots of my developers who want to access this, and my app owners want to access it. They want to access it from a cafe. So maybe I can restrict it by IP address, but it becomes a hassle very soon. So let's see how Security Center is going to help. So let's go back. And what you'll find in Security Center is this thing called just-in-time VM access, right? And what just-in-time VM access will do is, once it's enabled, I can actually put in a request. Okay, it's loading up now. So I actually have it enabled here. So it's gonna block off SSH ports by default, but my app owner, my developer, whoever wants to work on this app can request an access, and it's gonna have a workflow where the request comes to the admin, and the admin can enable access. And the cool thing here is that if I request access as a user, I just need to turn this on and say, okay, my IP, you see this time thing, that's very important. So I can ask access for a limited time, but as soon as the time expires, the port just goes back to being locked. So if you're a hacker, you probably have like very limited time, and that's one way to reduce your risk of getting hacked, right? So there's a whole workflow for this, so I feel good about the management port, and I feel like Security Center has given me all the scores on what I need to do. If I go back, I'm not going to save this. The other thing I want to show you is that threat detection. So what if, even with all these things can go wrong, right? And when things go wrong, how does Security Center really help me? So when this loads, I'm going to look and see if there is any alert that I should take a look at. Is there anybody trying to access anything? And so it's loaded now. So here's an example. So, that VM I just put up. And what was interesting for me was I was trying to figure out how to do this demo with you guys, and all that I needed to do was put this VM up with the public IP. That's it. And as soon as I did that, the Security Center started detecting issues for me. So what it's telling me here is that it's looking at this IP address, and Security Center actually is like, it's a fully managed service. It looks at like IPs across the world and figures out which ones are the malicious IPs. So what's telling me is that my VM is getting traffic from a malicious IP, which is not good. The good thing is like nothing's probably gone wrong yet, but it feels like the hackers are trying to tickle, they're trying to find a way to get into my VM. So thank God I got Security Center on, so I can see all these issues, and if there was any problem and there were like multiple issues happening, then this whole investigation path that I can go for, where I can see all the different issues and figure out how they are related, and thankfully there's nothing wrong going on now, so we're good that way. So looks like we have proactively done a lot of things, and if we had to go on a reactive path, Security Center gives us a way to do threat detection too.
Very cool. And Security Center, there's a free version that does the configuration, the first half of the demo. Did I configure things correctly to be protected as I can be protected? And then there's the paid version that does the JIT and the threat piece. As you'd expect for security reasons, I would strongly recommend enterprise customers do threat protection piece as well, unless you have some other threat protection that's available. It uses the 6 trillion signals per day from the Microsoft Security Graph. Speaking of security, Michelle just walked into the room. Cool. All right, let's talk to re-architect. You want to hit this one?
Yeah. So okay, we got everything. So we made that VM stateless, right? So we went from a local host, we put it on a single VM on Azure, so it was great. Then we took off some of those management overhead, started using fully managed service. And now we're in a state where the VMs are stateless. So I can take my API tier, put it on its own VMs. I can take my web tier, put it on its own VMs. I can scale them independently. And that's what I'm doing here in this re-architecture. I'm putting them in what is known as a actually it's VM scale set, so I'm putting it on each on its own scale set, and that way I can, regardless of what load is hitting my web tier or my API tier, I can scale them very independently. So this gives me much more leeway. But then the question I have, what's concerning me, Scott, is that I'm doing this, but I want to make sure all my resilience goals and my SLAs are going to be met if I do this. And the other thing is that there's a lot of things here. So I have like 6 VMs instead of 1 VM that I need to do now. And I have like 2 load balancers, a bunch of things I need to do in Azure. Can I like write a code and do infrastructure as code here?
Got it, great question. And really you're doing that to build resiliency, right?
Right.
And so resiliency is another topic like security where shared responsibility is a critical thing. You need to start from the top and say, okay, how resilient do I need my application to be? Am I okay if a bomb drops on an Azure region? Sometimes you're not. If it's a customer ordering app, you're not. Am I okay if the machines goes down? Most of the time you're not. Because Azure, like all public clouds, uses machines that are not SAN-based in most cases, and so machines will go down. So what is your level of redundancy that you build into your application architecture will be an important piece of that. And you need to think about it across multiple factors. The first factor is data. So do I back up my data? If somebody accidentally deleted a record from that MongoDB, will I feel good about it? No. I better have a backup of the data. That's what it's trying to achieve there. And then the second piece is more high availability. If within a single region a compute VM goes down, can I keep servicing my customers? I want to be able to do that as well. And then the third piece is if a whole region goes down, then how do I manage that? And I want to service my customers. And so we actually have a good white paper that's just about out the door that you answer the question for how much SLA do I want? Do I want 99.9? Do I want 99.95? Do I want 99.9995? And we'll recommend a combination of these services. But it's really important to have thought and associated with your apps in Azure on how much SLA you want and therefore how much resilience you want, because the infrastructure here is not free for us or for you. But there's a cost associated with it if your app went down. Now, to be fair, a single VM on Azure would do nothing has an SLA at 99.9. And at the other end of the spectrum, obviously, you can get much higher as you add capabilities. So some of the capabilities that we would consider, the first is availability sets. Okay, this really provides redundancy of those VMs, and I'd strongly recommend it for all production VMs. The second one is availability zones. Availability zones are a data center construct. Some of our data centers have them, some of them they don't. So you do want to check which regions you're in, which availability zones exist. It's a more modern concept, so not all of our older data centers have that. We're working on it. And an availability zone gives you within a region, if a building gets hit by lightning or a fire happens, which are real scenarios that have happened to us actually, then another building that's close by will take that workload and go for it. So where you can use workloads within regions that have availability zones, I would strongly recommend doing that. And then the third piece is, if that whole area gets hit by a bomb, or choose your favorite disaster, and multiple buildings get taken out, an availability zone actually doesn't solve the solution because they're relatively close located. How do you make sure you have a traditional DR-based capability so you can do a failover scenario And the HA obviously has near on no latency. The availability zones has minimal latency. And then DR is typically a process that has some latency associated with it as you spin up a set of VMs in another region and go forward. So this is a really important thing to consider. Where do you want to be on the spectrum, and therefore what technologies that you need from a resiliency perspective. And just while I'm here to keep us moving through slides, because we're going long, the second thing that I wanted to cover quickly before I hand it back to you was, in fact, automation. And so you've seen Shankar use the portal a lot. Many of our advanced customers don't use the portal a whole lot. They're in the Bash shell, Cloud Shell that was popped up there. It's built in the top of Azure, just like a DOS prompt or a standard Bash shell inside of Linux. And so scripting is a critical aspect of that. And so you can use ARM-based scripts to deploy any asset in Azure, and policies plug into that too. You can use the Cloud Shell, as I just mentioned, with Bash. If you're on the Windows side, it also does PowerShell, but for this audience for Bash. And then you can run a set of scripts based on triggers and prompts and create alerts, which are runbooks. And so, for example, you can automate something to take information from an alert and send that alert out to a ServiceNow instance, because maybe you want to put that alert into a ticketing instance. Or you can automate shut down VMs between these hours and those hours to save money, as an example. And so all of these things can be automated under the covers, and as I say, most of our customers spend a lot of time scripting and some time in the portal, despite the fact that most of the things we demo tend to be the portal, just because it's faster for us to demo it that way. So with that, let's take a look at some of the concepts in resiliency and automation from a demo perspective.
Right. So you know how we started off when we said, let's use the portal, then I flipped on and said, well, let's actually use the command line. What if we could just combine it together and have best of both worlds, right? That's what Cloud Shell does for you. So I can actually start a Cloud Shell session here. Once it comes up, it's actually going to start a whole Bash shell for me. And the cool thing is it's got storage attached with it, which is persistent. So I can upload all my script files here. And whenever I want, wherever I want, I can just bring up a browser, load in Azure portal, load in Cloud Shell, and just use it, right? So it's very cool. If you want to upload anything here, this button lets you upload like files and zip files and everything, and you get to use the full Bash capability, all right? So while that loads up, the other thing, Scott, you mentioned was ARM template. So what does an ARM template look like? So this is a way for me to do infrastructure as code. So let me bring up my ARM templates here. So you can see my ARM templates here. The key one here is my app deploy. So here's a way I can, it's besides state configuration, so I can set what I want. I need a jump box, I need a virtual network, I need a web tier, I need a business tier, I need a database, I need caching, all that. So I'm just going to set my desired state, and each of these things is modular. So for each of those modules I define, I can go and write a JSON file for it and define parameters for it. And the cool thing is, like, unlike you could have thought about scripting this too. That's one way of doing it. But the problem with the scripts is that it's there are lots of dependency that goes on when you create infrastructure. So when you create a load balancer and you have a VM behind it, you have to wait for the VMs to finish before you can hook it up to the load balancer and such. So ARM will take care of all those things for you. You just declare what you want, and it'll figure out the dependencies, and it'll try to run it as fast as possible for you. So it'll try to parallelize things for you. Okay. So let me get in here. And this is my Cloud Shell. No problem stepping in here. So I can actually take this thing and upload anything to the Cloud Shell and actually run this. I'm using Visual Studio Code, but you can use it running locally through your command line. You can start this ARM template, and it's going to create a whole deployment for you. And like I said, it's going to, wherever possible, try to parallel things up. So when I actually ran this script myself, it created the web tier and API tier. For the most part, it's parallel, so try to create those two in parallel, and then it just had to hook up a load balancer eventually. So you can do all that with ARM templates. Now, the thing here is that I feel like I'm still missing something, Scott, because although I can write my whole infrastructure as a JSON here, when we talked about governance and policy, that was very cool, right? I wish there was a way to just combine the policy, which seemed to be JSON, and this thing which is infrastructure as code, which is also JSON, and maybe combine this together. And is there a way to do that in Azure?
Yeah, I mean, you can combine those two things, and actually the third part of the puzzle is, roles and resources.
Yeah.
And so just to make sure that you're the appropriate person that has access to this,
Yeah.
in this notion of a blueprint that then sets up subscriptions for you.
Okay.
So yeah, take your ARM templates, take the policies that you created in governance, take the specific roles, and then you can create these repeatable units. So if you do outsourced development and you want to have a template for what an outsourced developer subscription looks like across the 5 different outsourced developers that you have around the world, you can do that, create this blueprint, and then spin up everything you need literally with a click of a button. It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, so that's the blueprint survey. So it essentially takes ARM, it takes policies, and it takes roles and combines it together. So now I can actually take this thing, and anybody who wants to run a copy of my app, I can just give it to them and to create the infrastructure, create all the guardrails in place, make sure you're abiding by all the policies, and you can just go create this copy of this app. It took me like 15 minutes to create a whole copy of my environment. Mm-hmm. It's very fast, it's very scalable. So
yeah. So it's less about chasing your tail at the end of the release management cycle, and much more about how much can you do up front to enable yourself to scale. And Blueprint's a perfect example of that. You set up a managed environment all ready to go for the app, and then just go scale it out wherever you need to.
Yeah. And so we have used all those things. We use ARM templates, we use Cloud Shell. If you're using Jenkins, how many of you use Jenkins here? Okay, not many. So you can automate all of that, right? That's really gives you an end-to-end pipeline where you can make a code change, or you can make a change to your app. It flows all the way to your infrastructure and gets deployed. So brings us to the last problem here, which is, okay, my app is up and running. It's running at scale. I got the re-architecture going. By the way, for re-architecture, you didn't have to make any code change. Like everything that worked when you refactored it just works for re-architecture, because you're just taking the same code and putting it on multiple VMs behind a load balancer. Now, the problem is that at this scale, if something goes wrong, it's going to be like looking for a needle in a haystack. So how do we do monitoring here and find issues?
Yeah, I mean, distributed application monitoring is critical. And in fact, if you're already running apps on Azure, if you get no other takeaway from the session, make sure that you turn security on, make sure you understand the resilience, and make sure if something goes wrong that you have monitoring go. Those are the 3 fundamental things that I'm surprised how many customers in the rush to get things running on Azure don't necessarily do the same things that they might have done on premises. So to help you do that, just like the others, we have built-in services. You could use Grafana or anything you want. But we have Azure Monitor here, which provides end-to-end observability. It actually works both for infrastructure and for applications, so it does APM-like functionality. If you have Python or Java-based applications that you want to instrument, as well as traditional infrastructure monitoring, health, VMs, etc. It has a shared database for logs, and you can do log search against that. It's a really rich environment, and given the time, why don't we show it instead of talk to it?
Yeah. So let me show you something here. So let's look at one issue. So I have my monitoring up, and I want to see if there's anything going wrong at all, right? I'm just going to go and look at my availability. So I'm looking at my availability here. It's going to take a second to load up. Let me see if I have it up. Okay. All right, so I'm looking at my availability, and there's something wrong here. So hopefully this is something that monitoring is detecting before my customers even notice. So there's a bunch of failures going on here. So I'm going to look at my failures.
Just while that's loading, of course, you can show it in the portal, or you can create an alert that would hit you on a page of ServiceNow, whatever you want to come back into here.
Okay, so here's what it thinks the failure is. And if I look at it, it gives me the whole trace. So it knows, because I've configured my APM to use monitoring, it knows every call that my app is making. It looks to all the distributed apps and figures out what's going wrong. So it looks like, if you look at this, the Redis thing has some problems. So it looks like a Redis cache issue. Any guess what could have been the problem? So you know how we turned off Redis cache before when we were saying, okay, this is a problem, like, you can't have non-SSL connections. The problem is that the port changes. So now the app is trying to listen to a port that we just blocked off. So lesson learned is like go through a change management. Like you detect a problem, you should probably go through a change management to figure out if there's any dependencies. But the good thing here is that even with the distributed app where there's so many components, with monitoring, you can actually find the exact problem and fix it. So that's really the lesson here. So enable Azure Monitor.
So it was listening on port 80 and then it went to, what's SSL base, 543 or something?
No, it's like 6379 and 638. So
oh, there you
go.
go.
Redis is weird.
Yeah. Oh, it listens on, yeah, okay, cool. Neat. Cool. And that's a tiny glimpse of monitoring. And you can collect logs, you can dive into those logs and do detailed analysis on it. You can do machine learning to enable you to understand what an issue might be as opposed to what it already is. So it'll look at a graph of data and point out an anomaly that may be a challenge.
How many of you use containers here? Kubernetes? Okay, right. So you should stop by the booth because we have a whole demo on how we monitor Kubernetes clusters. So it's really cool.
Yep. So there's a lot more than we had time for. But anyway, let's close it off. So here we are. Wow, we started with one VM and we're all the way here.
Yeah.
And you made a bunch of changes when you were doing that refactor to support 2 of the backend types. But a lot of this is infrastructure that you just plugged into the system.
Right.
And you've gone from a single VM on a dev box to this highly resilient architecture that supports a global environment, all by using Azure components.
Yeah. And it takes you like 15 minutes each because this is a version of the app that I showed you the ARM template for. I just run the app template twice and put a traffic manager in between. If you want the app to run across 3 regions, 5 regions, it's pretty simple. It takes me 15 minutes each to create a region. So
yeah, it's pretty incredible what you can do now with cloud resources. Of course, not everybody will get this far with every app in the first instantiation, and that's totally okay. But just to kind of start at the beginning or end at the beginning, one thing I did want to frame is if you are just starting your Azure journey, actually 2 things. Go to this website, which is the Azure Migration Center. It will take you through the process. We have tools that you can assess your existing virtual machines on premises and understand, where you need to make changes, where you don't need to make changes to migrate those. Tools to help you migrate it. And then a lot of the tools that we were talking about actually sit in the last 2 categories, which is optimization, those cost optimization tools that we showed earlier, and then securing and managing. If you already have workloads on Azure and you realize that they weren't secure, don't say that out loud, or didn't have as much management on them as you'd hoped, then please, as one of the takeaways, do that, because we do continue to see customers moving to the public cloud in such speed, or sometimes without central IT involved. The right level of hygiene services are not always used. And so it is a core thing that we repeat endlessly. Most of us and who've been around IT for a long period of time understand that. But you'd be surprised how many VMs on Azure customers have not yet fully secured. So we spend a lot of time with that. With that, thank you very much for listening. We're both available here right now. And we'll immediately head down once Shankar shows me the way to the booth. And so if you want to spend some time with us at the booth, we'd appreciate it as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you.